Hello, Soundies. Welcome to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 11th of February, 2024. It's great to have you here. Let's jump right over into our agenda. Got a lot to cover today. First, obviously, this is a workshop associated with our courses that are available online over at school.learnlightandsound.com. This is a live stream originally, but you may be joining later on after the stream. It's not a scripted presentation. It's a little bit less formal. And in some ways a lot more fun that way maybe. So we're going to talk today about what PFL is and what solo is and why you should care. And we also have some questions that were submitted ahead of time. We'll take a look at those. And then we're also going to pick up on our ear training again. We're going to probably hopefully do that at least once, maybe twice a month going forward. I think we're finding that's really useful. And so that's the order we'll do things today. So let's go ahead and jump in and first talk about PFL. So why should we care about PFL or solo functions on audio recorders and mixers? And first of all, we'll talk about what it is in more detail in just a second, but this is one of the most, well, it's a super important tool for helping you to be a better sound recordist, sound mixer, production sound mixer, whatever you're doing. And this is one of the tools I think a lot of newbies don't really know about, or they don't really know when they would use it or why they would use it. And we want to spend a little bit of time talking about that today. So first of all, what is PFL? PFL stands for pre-fader listen or pre-fade listen. And it's usually a function on a mixer that allows you to listen to an individual channel. So in other words, if you have a problem, you're hearing some buzz in your mix, some hum or some buzz, like the first thing you're probably thinking to yourself is, where is that coming from? How do I solve it? Where, and the first thing you can do is you can use pre-fader listen to figure out which channel that hum or buzz is coming into the mix on. So if we go to the overhead camera here, let me just show you. Here we have our Mackie DLZ XS, and you can see we have these buttons right here. And when I press this button, that's actually a solo button. We'll talk about the difference between solo and pre-fader listen in just a minute. But in many of them, I can actually listen to two channels at the same time if I want to do that. But I can also just do a single channel at a time if I want to do that. So that's a really, really good way to figure out, okay, I've got a hum. I got to figure out where it's coming from. So I might listen to that one. Then I come over to this one, listen to that one. Okay, it's not there. Maybe is it on this channel? I can listen there. I can listen on this channel, see if it's there. Or is it on this channel? Once you've narrowed it down, and now you've made your job of figuring out the problem or solving the problem that much easier, because now you don't have to mess with the other things. You know exactly which channel the hum may be coming in on. Now, it could also be coming in on your mixer. So if you're not finding it on any of the individual channels, maybe it's your mixer itself. And sometimes that can be a grounding issue with the power source that you're using for the mixer. But this is really good. PFL or solo is really good for finding out, okay, which channel is that coming on? You'll also notice here, sort of an orangish color, and that's pretty universal. Most mixers or recorders, when you press a solo button or a pre-fader listen, it's usually an orange button. Not always, but many, many times. So that's useful to know as well. Okay, let's go back to the agenda then. Now, what's the difference between solo and pre-fader listen? Now, with pre-fader listen, what it's actually doing is it's allowing you to not only hear that one channel, but it's also not applying the fader position. So wherever you have that fader, it's discounting that. It's giving you the feed directly off of the gain. So whatever gain level you've set, it's not giving you the sound from anything else you've done, any EQ, anything else lower in that channel. It's just letting you hear just that raw microphone channel or other input if you're using other inputs as well, other instruments or whatever, with nothing else. That's what pre-fader listen does. Now, solo is a little bit different because it does take into account, it also solos that track. It lets you listen to just that track, but it does allow the fade, it does apply the fader, and it does apply the effects in most cases. It can differ a little bit from mixer to mixer, so you need to check your particular mixer to confirm, but that's the general difference between pre-fader listen and solo, and they're both very, very useful tools. In some cases, you actually have an option whether you want to pre-fader listen or solo when you either go into the input menu for that particular channel or when you press the PFL button or the solo button. All right, now let's go back to the overhead really quickly. This, on the Mackie DLZ, this is the DLZ XS, the small one. When I press this, this is actually a solo button. And so I'm actually getting all of the effects that I've applied for this channel. So here, for example, the gate, when I press that button, it'll send it just to my headphones. By the way, that's another thing that's important. It's not going to necessarily change the mix. It's just going to change what I hear in my headphones while I have that engaged. So it will apply the gate in this case. It will apply the compressor that I have set here. And whoops, if I go back to the channel, the de-esser, if I had that on, it would apply that as well. So that's important to keep in mind. On most field recorders and mixers, here for example, we have the Zoom F6. Let me just get that powered up. Let me show you some kind of nuances from device to device. And this is where you just want to check the manual for your device. Danny, is that in focus, or do I need to focus that for the Zoom now?
It's a little fuzzy.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and focus that. Why don't we go back to the agenda really quick. Okay, now we can come back to the overhead here. And whoops. I haven't powered on for a while, so I had to set my date. There we are. Okay. Now on the F6, and on a lot of field recorders, in fact, the way that Prefader, Listen, or Solo works is you go into the input channel for that channel. So here on the F6, I just press the check. That takes me into the input settings for channel number 1, which I've actually named as my boom mic. And when I do that, now I'm only hearing this channel. And on the Zoom F6, I get an option. I can actually, you see this monitor option down here. I can choose to pre-fade or listen, or I can actually change it to solo. So if I want to hear whatever effects may be applied there and what fader setting I have applied there, I can choose to do that. So this is an example of a field recorder where I can choose whether I listen pre-fader or solo, which again, solo is basically post-fader and any sort of effects as well. All right, so that's the Zoom F6. While we're here, it's a little bit different on the MixPre series. Let me just show you this here. So I'm going to bring a MixPre in, and we're probably going to need to refocus that as well. Let me just get that powered on, and while we're powering that on, let's go back to the agenda just so that we don't have too much camera shake for folks there. Okay. Now we can go back to the overhead here. All right, on the MixPre, it's a little bit different. Now, when I come into the channel here, you'll notice that I have a solo button right there. And so that's going to include any effects and whatever fader setting I have applied. Now, I have a couple of options here. You'll notice here, if I go over now to channel 2, and if I solo that one, this orange flashing, by the way, indicates, hey, you're soloing, you're just listening to this channel right now. You'll notice now when I came and did solo on channel 2, it stopped soloing channel 1. And I can likewise, if I come back to channel 1 and I solo that, oh, I can only solo one at a time based on the current settings. You can actually change that. If you want to be able to solo multiple at the same time, you can do that. Let me explain why you might want to do that. So the one at a time is nice because if I'm quickly going through, I don't have to go back and unsolo this one and then solo this one. I can just quickly come through and solo each of them, and it will unsolo the ones that I don't want. So that may actually be a perfectly legitimate way to do this, depending on what you're trying to achieve. Sometimes you want to be able to solo multiple channels at the same time, and the reason for that might be, hey, I've got a group here. Maybe it's a set of drum overheads, or maybe it's a stereo pair of microphones. In that case, what you can do is if you come back into the main menu, and then we go up to our headphone presets up here, and let's go to the final page. Here, headphone solo, it's set to individual, meaning you can only solo an individual channel at a time, but I can change that to multiple if I want to. Now when I pop out here, I can actually solo channel 1 and channel 2 at the same time. Now you'll see both of them are flashing. They're both soloed. So that's how the general idea works. There's also one other setting here on the MixPre that's important. I believe it's in the, is it the inputs menu? Here. On knob press, I can either just come into the channel menu, and that'll give me the channel view, or I can come into the channel and solo that channel as well. So if you want to do it just like they do on the Zoom F6, in fact, that means that anytime I press one of the channel buttons to come into the channel, it's automatically soloing that channel for me. At the same time, you'll notice, and when I press this, now it's solo here. Press here, now it's soloing here. So on and so forth. So that's another option for you. So that's just a quick view of how you can do that on a couple of different recorders and mixers. And it works fairly similar across field recorders and mixers. If you get to a tabletop mixer or a console or things like that, you'll just want to check with the documentation for the particular one that you're using. They're all a little bit different there as well. So some of them are solo, some of them are PFL, and some of them allow you to solo multiple at the same time. Some of them allow you only to solo a single one, or PFL a single one at a time. So just check your documentation for that. Okay, let's go back and check out the chat and see if there are any questions about pre-fader listen or soloing out there. Danny's taking a look here. Having a control surface to do this is a lifesaver. Absolutely. If you're dedicated on sound, I completely agree. Having a control surface makes this super easy and allows you to work faster. And that's one of the huge advantages of having a dedicated sound person, is that you can have one person 100% focused on sound and making those decisions very quickly, so that you generally won't have to do as many takes. And you also are less likely to get back to post-production and realize, I didn't wear headphones and I didn't notice that this was all a horrible mess. I had gained up too much, or I had buzz and hum and I didn't catch it, or whatever. Okay. Could not live without solo PFL button in live sound. Absolutely agree. Just another note here, just to make sure that this is clear as well, is on most field recorders, when you press that button, it's not changing what gets sent to the mix. It's not soloing to the mix or pre-fader listening to the mix. It's still sending the full mix out. So if you have something, say, field recorder connected to your camera, the camera is still getting the full mix. It's just in your headphones where you're getting the solo or the pre-fader listen. Again, check your documentation for your particular device just to confirm that, or test it yourself, but that's an important one. Okay, all good on the chat? All right, let's jump into our questions that were submitted this week. So we'll actually go to the...
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. All right, here we go. Couple that were submitted. The first one is arguably a rant, but I 100% agree with it, and let's talk it through here. So I'll read this for you. I know it's tiny little type, but it's a lot to cover here. Observation: 90+% of content creators who live stream either use some sort of ATEM or YOLO box. I would actually clarify, Matt. This is actually, I would say 90% use ATEM minis or YOLO box or some similar device. And both of those have lousy 1/8 inch or 3.5 millimeter audio jacks. If you want good audio and have a nice camera that has XLR inputs like an FX30, an FX3, a Canon C70, Matt's actually saying here, go ahead and send the audio to camera. And then the camera will send the audio in with the video via HDMI into one of those switchers. You do have the option with the YOLO box to bring in a USB mic, and that is cleaner than anything I could bring in via the 1/8 inch port. I used a Rode Video NTG shotgun mic via USB and got better results than a Sennheiser MKH50, which is a $1,200 mic, into a MixPre 6.2, which is over $1,000, and a 1/8 inch into the ATEM or YOLO box. I've always believed video is 60% audio. I just wish that the people at YOLO Live and Blackmagic took audio seriously. How much would mini XLR jacks and a good preamp cost? It's a fair point, and I completely agree. I'd love to see the more devices have balanced inputs, preferably on XLR, but even if they weren't, balanced would be really nice. I think the product companies partly do this to themselves too. They set the wrong expectations with some of these devices, but let's keep in mind, The ATEM minis, I don't even think they sell the just ATEM mini anymore. I think you can only get the ATEM mini Pro or higher. And they put the word Pro in the name. And I think that's a big, big mistake because it sets the wrong expectations for all of us. So you have no balanced inputs. You have mediocre 3.5 millimeter inputs that are unbalanced. They're noisy preamplifiers. Even if you send a clean audio from something like a MixPre, you're still going to pick up some of the noise that's imparted by the inputs on the ATEM minis. I don't think they should, personally, number one, I don't think they should call them Pro if they have no intention of supporting Pro audio workflows. And that goes even for, they have newer versions, I believe, of the ATEM minis with SDI inputs, which is arguably Pro. HDMI is arguably not Pro, at least the connectors, and you can't run them cables quite as far. In any case, I guess what I'm saying, Matt, is I agree with you. I wish they would make something smaller form factor like the ATEM minis that had balanced inputs. That would be really nice. Now, I will say their ATEMs, the larger form factor, those do have XLR inputs. And I don't know if they might just be line level inputs. I can't remember. And it depends, I think, on the model, from model to model. But yeah, it would be nice if they took audio a little bit more seriously and gave us clean preamplifiers, something that truly switches to line level and doesn't just pad down a preamplifier and just leave all the noise, and 3 that has balanced inputs. Those would be really, really nice. So I agree with your rant. I'd like to formally and hereby sincerely send a wish and a request to Blackmagic Design to include balanced inputs on the next iteration of the ATEM mini line, at least the higher end models in that line. Okay, next question is from Joe L, and this actually has to do with loudness. I have a question about adjusting the audio level to a target minus 16 LUFS, starting with a file that measures, say, minus 22 LUFS, or 6 dB quieter than the target. If I simply add 6 dB to the output of the mix, the result is often lower than expected, say minus 19 LUFS. My audio tracks have lots of loud noises plus a little dialogue followed by some quiet time. Is the nonlinearity of the correction due to the way the LUFS level is calculated? Are the quiet portions getting weighted more in the average than the peaks? If that's the case, then for my application, is adjusting the final level just going to be trial and error compared to a dialogue or voiceover sequence where there is little or no quiet time? It's a great question, Joe, and thanks for submitting that. LUFS is actually more intelligent than older school ways of measuring loudness, and it actually does take into account silent portions or portions where the audio falls below a certain threshold. It actually discounts that. It deweights it. It pulls it out of the equation so it's not skewing the overall measurement. I think what you're doing is, if I'm not mistaken, you're at the shooting range, you fire your gun, you talk a little bit, and then you're quiet the rest of the time. I don't think using LUFS on the entire thing is going to help you. I think really what you probably should do is measure the dialogue portions. So just highlight those and measure those in terms of LUFS, and target those for minus 16 or wherever, and then apply an appropriate fader or whatever, automation, something to pull the gunshots down so that they're not clipping, or if they are clipping, they're sounding the way you want them to sound. Sometimes clipped guns can kind of provide more impact, I suppose, but they do sound distorted at the same time. So whatever you want there, but I would target just the dialogue and just let the rest of it fall where it falls. That's how I would approach it. If you highlight the entire thing and it's mostly silence or room noise or outdoor noise, ambiance, it's going to really mess with the measurements. So you're doing something a little bit different. Normally LUFS is targeted for spoken word audio or programs that are mostly spoken word or spoken word and music. So hopefully that helps. So I don't know which app you're using to do the measurements, but I would just measure the dialogue portion. And then from there, you can just boost the overall. So for example, if you're at minus 22 and you want to get to minus 16, I'm assuming you're in stereo, then you will just apply an offset of 6 dB. You'll just boost it by 6, the overall entire audio program by 6 decibels. and that should get you roughly where you want to be. Okay, that is the question that we had. All right, let's go ahead and check in with the chat, see if there's anything in the chat that we need to address, and then we'll get into our ear training. And while we do that, I'm going to take a little sip of water here. Okay, anything going on? Oh, here we go. Matt says, was watching Emma's review and loving it, so wish I could run commentary of my kids, LOL. For those of you that haven't seen the video that we did, I was away this week. And so I did a little bit of testing. We did a light review, and we were looking at this particular light. I did some of the testing before I left, and then Emma actually did the review. She was the one sitting at the table talking. And then she sent me the rough cut that she did, and then I provided my commentary on top of that, just trying something a little bit new. That's what Matt's referring to. So if that sounds like fun to you, I hope you enjoyed it as much as Emma and I enjoyed making it. So she's a tough reviewer too. She's brutal. Okay, two-part.
It's a comment. I mean, it's a commentary, not so much.
I did place a comment with a link and pictures of my Fairlight Evo from 2017. I did buy recently with 10 modules. New price was
It was a lot more than what she bought it for.
Oh wow, yeah, a lot more. I'm not sure if that's 1.3 million or 135,000. I did bought it for just 5,000. The owner before is now retired in pension or retired, but still will help with mixes in high level quality and teaching. 40 years of experience. That's very exciting, Danielle. I'm excited for you to have that beautiful console and can't wait to hear what you make with it.
And a mentor.
And a mentor to boot.
I mean,
that's
cool.
Pretty amazing. Good for you. And a steal at that price. Mark says, off topic, I'm looking for a way to control MixPre record stop from a StreamDeck through the MixPre USB connection. Any ideas or know anyone who might? I would submit your request, first of all, to the good people over at Sound Devices. I don't know if there's a way for them to, I don't know how realistic it is for them to actually essentially create host software on the MixPre to support a StreamDeck. I don't know. But I would put that request into them first. And then I don't know anyone beyond that who's done it. They have included support for a few USB control surfaces. But StreamDeck would be a pretty interesting one nowadays. There's so many StreamDecks out there. Great idea, Mark. Thanks for that. Yes, in regards to the ATEM minis, they are not pro. They are not even semi-pro. Yeah, I was talking about the mini line. Yeah, and I agree. It's the same. There are lots of consumer electronic product companies using the term pro, I think inappropriately. Blackmagic does it. Apple does it. Rode does it with their Rode Wireless Pro, their Rode Caster Pro. I feel like it's a term that everyone, the marketing people have jumped on that bandwagon, and I think I would implore them to realize that that's problematic. Yeah, I don't like the abuse of that term, actually. It just it messes up the expectations, because what they're trying to do with a product name is set an expectation for what you get. But I'm just not sure pro. Is it like a phone that's a pro? That seems weird to me. Maybe. An ATEM Mini that's pro. Yeah, I mean, I'm using it for professional live stream here. This is a business. We have our online school. So I do also have an ATEM, the big one. This one's just easier to integrate with what we're doing here. But yeah, I agree. It's a problem. In response to Matt R's question, will audio into MixPre then output that to camera mic input and then HDMI into ATEM Mini be better option for cleaner audio? It depends on your camera, Mark. In some cases, yes. I've actually found when I was streaming with my Panasonic GH5s that I got better audio that way than coming in directly to the ATEM Mini Pro Extreme ISO, whatever the name of these things are. It's kind of a silly But yeah, I have found, it depends on the camera you're using, but yeah, I found it was cleaner that way. The light review is good, but I haven't finished it yet. Okay, well, enjoy that. All right, let's do a little bit of ear training, and then we'll come back to the chat and play around in the chat a bit. So you all know the routine here. We're going to do it live today. Danny is going to read from The Barrel Coronet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which starts a Sherlock Holmes story. She's going to go ahead and read, and I'll tell her when to get started here. While she does that, I'm going to apply different types of equalization and compression, and I will hold my finger up like this when the effect is on, and I will hold my hand up like this when the effect is off, and we'll go ahead and get started here. So let me go ahead and gain Danny up and go ahead and start talking.
How's my positioning? Okay. As long as she was on the scene, he could not take any action without a horrible exposure of the woman whom he loved. But the instant that she was gone, he realized how crushing a misfortune this would be for you, and how all-important it was to set it right. He rushed down, just as he was, in his bare feet, opened the window, sprang out into the snow, and ran down the lane, where he could see a dark figure in the moonlight. Sir George Burnwell tried to get away, but Arthur caught him, and there was a struggle between them, your lad tugging at one side of the coronet and his opponent at the other. In the scuffle, your son struck Sir George and cut him over the eye. Then something suddenly snapped, and your son, finding that he had the coronet in his hands, rushed back, closed the window, ascended to your room, and had just observed that the coronet had been twisted in the struggle and was endeavoring to straighten it when you appeared.
Stop there. Okay. All right. All right, friends, go ahead and put your guess in the chat. What did we do there? Compression, EQ, and if we did EQ, if we did compression, if it was overdone or if it was done in a tasteful way. And number two, if it was EQ, what frequency? And I will give you this hint: it was a cut. So if it was EQ, roughly what frequency did we cut at? What mic is she using? She is using a Shure SM57 with the can't remember what the name of that pop shield is. That it was made by another company, and then Shure acquired that little company, and it's a nice windshield. It uses a little set screw to place the foam a little bit away from the diaphragm of the microphone, the capsule of the microphone, and anyway, that's what she's using. EQ, boost in treble. Thank you for your guess. Treble, okay. What other guesses do we have out there? Got a little latency here, so it's taking a little bit of time, of course. That one was I didn't start super easy this time, although it was a pretty extreme move what I did. Okay, there's another one from I Am Not a Cat, compression, but not overdone. Okay, good guess. That's a very cute icon there, by the way. I'm lost in the dialogue. Fair enough. We'll do some more. Sounded more open with the effect. Boost 5,000 hertz? Question mark. Very good. Thanks for your guess. Good, good. Okay, let's go to the overhead, and I will show you exactly what we did. I'm going to refocus here. My mistake. We need to. Oh, okay. Well, there's me standing up. Okay, back to the overhead. There we go. Now we're in focus here. So when I turned it on, it was an EQ cut at 1.1 kilohertz, so 1,100 hertz, and we cut by almost 12 dB. And then the width was right around 3. Of course, the Q setting essentially defines the nature of that curve. We were right around 3, so not super narrow, but also not super wide. Now remember, the thing that's interesting here is that when you do a cut at one frequency, it can sometimes sound like a boost at another frequency. It can sound like a boost either at lower or higher frequencies, so keep that in mind. That's an important thing. Sometimes people say, oh, it sounds kind of thin. And what they find is that if you do a mid-range cut, sometimes that even things out, or it makes things sound much richer. Like the bass will be more prominent. There'll be less resonant kind of mid-rangey hype. And then it can potentially open up the highs a little bit as well. So that was our first one. Okay, let's switch on back. When I give you what signal should I send you when I need you to stop? Should I go like this? Okay. I'll go like this. That means.
Well, I have to read, so I don't know that I'll see any cue.
Okay, how about I go like this?
Yeah, that's
okay. All right. We got our plan worked out here. All right. Okay, we're going to gain Danny up. Go ahead and start talking. I'm going to start with it off. I'll come in with the finger up when I first turn it on.
Do you want me to read the same passage? As long as she was on the scene, he could not take any action without a horrible exposure of the woman whom he loved. But the instant that she was gone, he realized how crushing a misfortune this would be for you, and how all-important it was to set it right. He rushed down just as he was in his bare feet, opened the window, sprang out into the snow, and ran down the lane, where he could see a dark figure in the moonlight. Sir George Burnwell tried to get away, but Arthur caught him, and there was a struggle between them, your lad tugging at one side of the cornet, and his opponent at the other. In the scuffle, your son struck Sir George and cut him over the eye. Then something suddenly snapped, and your son, finding that he had the coronet in his hands, rushed back, closed the window, ascended to your room, and had just observed that the coronet had been twisted. To be continued.
Good reading, Danny. Thank you for that. Okay, everybody go ahead and put in your answer into the chat there. Oh, we've got one from Crazy Sheep Film already. Let's see what Crazy Sheep Film said. Heavy compression is Crazy Sheep Film's guess. Very good. Let's see what others have to say. Compressed. Okay. Or an EQ cut in the low end. Okay, a couple guesses there. Non-tasteful compression from our friend Red Frame Tech. Thank you for that. It's a kind way to say it. Non-tasteful compression. Compression with a high cut. Let's see if I left the high cut on. I actually think I did leave the high cut on. Nope, I did not. So someone says a low cut. All right, Mark says compression. Okay, let's go back to the overhead camera here. All right, this is what we had on here. This is a compressor here. And let me have, Danny, can you read 2 lines really quickly?
As long as she was on the scene, he could not take any action without a horrible exposure of the woman whom he loved. But the instant that she was gone, he realized how crushing a misfortune this would be for you, and how all-important it was to set it right. He rushed down just as he was, in his bare feet, opened the window, sprang out into the snow, and ran down the lane, where he could see a dark figure in the moonlight.
Okay, so you could see there was a ton of compression going on. As she talked, that yellow reduction bar, that's the one in the middle there, was basically constantly on. And the question is, okay, which of these settings is really extreme? We have an attack of 2.2 milliseconds, a release of 116 milliseconds on our compressor here, a ratio of 2 to 1, and a threshold of minus 47 dB. There's our problem right there. In fact, I'm going to have Danny go ahead and read again, and just keep going until I give you the signal. And what I'm going to do here is adjust the threshold to a much more tasteful level. So here we go.
As long as she was on the scene, he could not take any action without a horrible exposure of the woman whom he loved. But the instant that she was gone, he realized how crushing a misfortune this would be for you, and how all-important it was to set it right. He rushed down just as he was, in his bare feet, opened the window, sprang out into the snow, and ran down the lane, where he could see a dark figure in the moonlight.
Okay, so that is generally how you can make a huge change. We ended up coming up to minus 21 dB. So the much higher threshold. So it let a lot more of her dialogue through without any compression this time. And then it was just managing basically the parts that were higher amplitude or louder. So that's a much more tasteful approach for dialogue audio. Go ahead. Oh, threshold's just out of frame. My mistake. Yes, so we changed it. My mistake. Thank you so much. So we were at minus 47. We ended up at minus 21. And the important thing to see there really is as Danny talks, let's have you do that again, Danny.
Sir George Burnwell tried to get away, but Arthur caught him, and there was a struggle between them, your lad tugging at one side of the coronet and his opponent at the other. In the scuffle, your son struck Sir George and cut him over the eye. Then something suddenly snapped, and your son, finding that he had the coronet in his hands, rushed back, closed the window, ascended to your room, and had just observed that the coronet had been twisted in the struggle and was endeavoring to straighten it when you appeared on the scene. "Is it possible?" gasped the banker. You then roused his anger by calling him names at a moment when he felt that he had deserved your warmest thanks. He could not explain the true state of affairs without betraying one who certainly deserved little enough consideration at his hands. He took the more chivalrous view.
It's hard for me to stop right in the middle of the
Yeah,
sentence.
sorry about that. Okay, so thanks, Mark. Apologies, I had the threshold setting out of the frame the first time. So that's how we approach that. What I'm listening with my ear. That's the most important thing. But I'm also watching to see how often the compressor engages. And if I switch it back over to my mic here, and look at the compressor. All right, checking our levels here. 1, 2, 3. Here's where I'm heavily compressing, and you can see the yellow bar is showing how much attenuation or compression it's applying here. You can hear that. And then if we bring it back up to more reasonable levels here, we might end up somewhere around here where it's just getting the loudest bits and managing those and just kind of keeping things under control a little bit without crushing the overall sound. So that was our compression sample for today. All right, let's try one more. Oh, wait, we have a question or a comment. Yep, the mouth noises are elevated with the compression. Indeed, that's an important thing to keep in mind. That's why there are all these different processors. It's not easy getting your audio to a target loudness if it's something more aggressive. So, for example, for podcasts and videos, a lot of times that involves needing to do a little bit more compression so that you can loudness normalize to a target that you're trying to achieve, minus 16, for example, minus 17. When you do that, other non-pleasant things become more prominent. If you're not careful, and if we go back to the overhead, mouth noises certainly are one thing, but also if you keep your release time, I found that I used to do longer release times, but what I found, and by longer, I mean like 500 milliseconds. The problem I found with those is that tends to emphasize the breaths between words a little bit more. And we definitely don't want to do that. Also, attack, if you go too fast on the attack, that will potentially help manage some mouth noises, but it'll also soften the consonants. And you generally want those consonants at the start of a word to be fairly prominent. So you want to let those through a little bit. So I've, at this point, for most dialogue, landed on an attack somewhere around a couple of milliseconds, a couple of milliseconds. And in a release, somewhere between maybe 100, 150 milliseconds roughly. I find if you go faster on the release, you're less likely to pick up the breaths between words. So that's kind of my thinking there. But yes, and then you have to go, if you are doing that compression to loudness normalize, you're probably going to need to do a little bit of treatment. That's where I find mouth declick and declick in RX super helpful for managing the kind of the mouth noise a little bit. So, all right. Crazy Sheep Films, why does it sound like we are losing low end when the compression is so heavy, or am I totally wrong? Everything just sounds muddy, and everything is just getting squashed. In some cases, you actually end up with more bass. Like, so if you compensate by turning your volume up, I think you're going to find you have more bass there. The bass is actually getting compressed too. Yeah, it's a horrible, horrible sound. So, question, what is your makeup gain set as? Is there a meter for that? So yeah, we can go back over to the overhead here. So makeup right now is set. It doesn't have a number next to it, but it's this setting right here. I was adjusting that a little bit. And then this is the output meter right here on the right-hand side. So if I pop back out to the main, this is what we're doing here to my particular channel right now. So this is actually a post fader meter right here. So that shows the compression being applied there. And actually, yeah, something like that. So hopefully that answers your question. Does the DLZ have presets for compression? It does. So you can see the presets right here. This is originally started as the SM7B compression, but I've actually modified it. So I'm not even really using that, but it does have a variety of them. You can do a light, a mid, heavy, flat, and they have a 7B compressor as well as a preset. This is, I think if I change... okay, were we on this screen when I was talking about it? Okay, cool. All right. Yep. So yeah, there are some presets to answer that question.
Jump in the gun. I thought you were done.
Cool.
Couple more.
Mouth declick is a godsend. It absolutely is. It is an indispensable tool in our little toolkit. In fact, I use, the things that I use the most are compressor, an equalizer, and mouth declick. Those are probably the 3 top audio processors that we use in my work on a regular basis. This is amazing teaching. The process of go to extremes, then pull back applies to so many areas: photography, editing, graphics, lighting, etc. It does, absolutely. It gets your eyes and your ears of a serious difference that you can obviously hear, and then you back off some. That's a really good way, I think, on a compressor in particular, is a lot of times I'll start with a ratio between 2:1 and 3:1. I will pretty much dial in my attack around 2.5 milliseconds, release around 100, maybe a little bit more than 100 milliseconds. And then I will take that threshold and move it all over the place to try to, first go really extreme and then back off until it sounds good, but we're also getting things managed a little bit as well. We're evening things out a little bit as well. So it's you're right. It's an absolutely really indispensable approach. I think a really good approach. Chiri, feel free to answer this at the end, but would squelch have an effect on the noise floor of wireless units? I noticed there is a higher noise floor on the Deity compared to the G4 units I'm using. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, honestly. I'm not I think the squelch setting... Yeah, I apologize. I don't know the answer to that, honestly. Okay, let's go to the chat and see what's happening in, oh, no. We need to do one more ear training. We're going to go back to the ear training. Here we go. All right, I am going to go back into channel 2. I'm going to reset things. Danny's going to just talk, just going to let you listen to her for a while with no processing, and then as soon as I turn on the processing, I'll hold my finger up and then I'll toggle back and forth. This is off, this is on. So same place.
As long as she was on the scene, he could not take any action without a horrible exposure of the woman whom he loved. But the instant that she was gone, he realized how crushing a misfortune this would be for you, and how all important it was to set it right. He rushed down, just as he was, in his bare feet, opened the window, sprang out into the snow, and ran down the lane, where he could see a dark figure in the moonlight. Sir George Burnwell tried to get away, but Arthur caught him, and there was a struggle between them, your lad tugging at one side of the coronet, and his opponent at the other. In the scuffle, your son struck Sir George and cut him over the eye. Then something suddenly snapped, and your son, finding that he had the coronet in his hands, rushed back, closed the window, ascended to your room, and had just observed that the coronet had been twisted in the struggle and was endeavoring to straighten it when you appeared on the scene. Is it possible? Gasped the banker.
Okay. Good one. So put your guesses in the chat, and we'll take a look here in just a moment here to see what nefarious changes we were making here. Is nefarious the right term? No. Ill-advised changes?
Oh, well, maybe it is.
Yeah. Cut around 125 to 250 hertz. Ooh. Okay. EQ. Yep. Thanks for that crazy. Audio Buff says high pass. Okay, good. Low cut. By the way, high pass and low cut, same thing, different names. Low cut at 150 hertz. Good guess, Mark. Low cut, 200 hertz. Very good guess. Low cut from Red Frame Tech. 250 hertz cut from Zach. Good. Low cut at 80 hertz from Tim. Cut around 200 hertz from Steve. Cut 200 hertz from Mark. Low cut and maybe a very high cut telephone effect.
I'm glad I couldn't hear this.
Yeah. Good. Let me before we answer, I'm curious, how many of you are using a real-time analyzer to figure out what's changing? How many of you have actually pulled that out and applied it to the live stream so you can tell where the change is taking place? If you are, you're clever. Good job. But it is good to just train your ears as well. So let's go to the overhead and I'll show you exactly what change we made here. We did make a cut. The cut is exactly at 194 hertz. It is a 10 dB cut. So many of you were actually spot on. Really, really good job using those ears to hear what changes. And it does, interestingly, you're right, it does give it almost a telephone kind of sound to it because of just that one cut. There were no high cuts as well. But even just that one cut sometimes can make the other frequencies sound different as well. It's a very interesting phenomenon that happens when you when you EQ audio. And I generally find that I don't generally need more than 2-3 control points at most when I'm applying EQ. I find I can generally get it where I need to. If you need 17 different control points in your EQ, there might be something else wrong. Just something to keep in mind. So cool. Let's go back to the chat and see what people have to say. We have about 15 minutes. Tim, I'm on my cell phone. That's amazing that you were able to pick that out. Just my Sennheiser HD 560s for this round. That's a good call there. Audio Buff, just me and my iPhone. And the wife. Good. Jude, it's good to have you back. Mark 1 ears here. Very good. Nice job. I am not using any tech, just my old ears. Excellent. I don't have an analyzer for these ear training sessions. I'm proud of you all for not having analyzers and actually just trusting your ears. Super useful. Makes you better audio engineers when you do that. RTA for work, no RTA for learning. Yes, Mark, absolutely. Good. All right. Well, that's everything we had prepped for today. If you have any questions and you want to drop those in the chat, please go ahead and do that. If you can prefix it with @CurtisJuddAudio, that'll make it really easy for Danny to find it and put it up on screen. And we will talk through it. I'm going to take just a quick break here to get a sip of water as Danny looks through the chat here. There is a comment here from Giuseppe at the end there, Danny, if you want to put that up. This is answering the question about squelch. Squelch should not have an audible effect on noise floor, except perhaps at the very edge of reception. Its primary function is to shut off the receiver in the absence of a signal. Okay, yeah, what I was thinking was that it's a way if there are dropouts or significant dropouts, it's instead of getting all the it squelches that. It essentially turns that off so you don't get all that noise. So Giuseppe, thanks so much for sharing that. Parametric EQ is the key. Yes, love parametric EQ. Wow, I thought it was from 200 and below. You were almost right on. You were so close. You were within 6 hertz. That's amazing. Your original guess. So good job. Compression, and it needs the right order of EQ and compression. Yes, the order in which you do EQ and compression can make a difference as well. One thing that's useful is I typically approach it by applying EQ first, any corrective EQ first. So if there is a resonance of some sort and you're getting, in my voice, a lot of microphones will have this tendency to really, really emphasize, or maybe it's just my voice, around between 900 and 2000 hertz. It can start to sound really crunchy in that realm. And so a cut before I do any compression can help. In music, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll actually do a pretty aggressive low cut to manage the bass, then do the compression, and then boost the bass back up to help keep it sounding a little bit more balanced. Because oftentimes if you look at, don't switch over yet, but I'm going to go ahead and try and pull up some audio here in, let's use Audition today, shall we? Oh, looks like it just updated, so it's going to take it a second to open here. Here we go, and here we go to get some audio. You can go ahead and switch over at this point now, Danny. Let's just get, yeah, get the right. Okay, so if I just come over here and I open up my frequency analysis, let's just scan the whole thing. Notice that there's, amplitude-wise, there's more bass here than anything. So, and this is just a spoken word sample here. So attenuating some of this will make it so it compresses more evenly across the frequency spectrum. So sometimes you'll see in music mixing in particular, they'll actually apply a pretty aggressive low cut first and then do the compression and then boost the bass back up. Kind of an interesting approach. Okay, back over to the chat then. All right. Question, random one for you. I need an external SSD for video editing and my new M2 iPad Pro. Any suggestions? I haven't really used SSDs with the iPad Pro. I would say a couple things. Number one, be careful of these. I like, SanDisk has generally made really good products. They were purchased by, I think, Western Digital or someone. They had a round of these that were, this was a 4 terabyte. And the first round of these that came out failed dramatically. So they've replaced mine, and this new one seems to work fine, although I haven't done heavy editing on it. We gave it to Emma. The very first project she worked on, she got a day through the project, a day into the project, and then everything disappeared from this drive. It just failed. So I would avoid this. We have been using for external drives, SSD drives, those several from OWC. They make a variety of different external SSD drives, and we bought, recently we bought one for her. I think it's, I don't remember what the model name is, but let me show them to you. I'll just come on over to, let's see, is it Mac Mall? I don't remember. OWC SSD. Let's do a search for that. Okay, let's take a look at this. So let's see, external portable drives. This is the one, the Envoy Pro FX is the one that we bought for Emma recently. It's a Thunderbolt, very, very fast. I think we got a 4 terabyte version. That's been working well. This looks like a new one. I haven't used that. I used this one on my main computer here. This one's been very good. Again, it's a Thunderbolt. Emma's used this one. We're having trouble with the cable now. She's used it for quite a while with a laptop, and it gets plugged in and unplugged every day for the last like year and a half, and the cable connector appears to be failing at this point, so we may need to replace that. Yeah, so those are the ones that I've been using. This one is what Emma's using on the Mac. She's used that on the Mac. I use that on my Mac here. So those are the ones I can tell you about. Something, I don't know if the iPad Pro, is it Thunderbolt enabled? I'm not even sure. So you'll probably want to figure that out first if you don't already know. I don't know. And then you'll need to choose either USB or Thunderbolt from there. So OWC's been really solid for us. Off topic, I'm just starting to experiment adding video to my audio field recordings. Any suggestions for basic non-overkill software to help with this? Are you asking about video editing applications? If so, I'd start with DaVinci Resolve, the free version, and just try it and see how you like it. If you do like it, then it may be worth getting the paid version, which is a one-time $300 purchase. And that gives you the surround mixing capabilities in addition to, I think, some other more advanced features. But that would be one way to start if that's what you're looking for. We've done, for the last, I don't know, 8 years, we've been editing in Final Cut Pro, and it's starting to annoy me. And it's really good for video. It's not so great for audio, so I don't think I would go there necessarily. It sounds like the field recordings are the important thing in what you're doing there. So I wouldn't do that. At work, we use Premiere. Again, I'm not sure if you're looking for a video editing app suggestion, but I'd probably start with DaVinci if so. Can you please explain your EQ for the live stream? Yes. So if we go back to the overhead, this is the EQ I have on my channel, which is basically just a high-pass filter at 69 Hertz. That's all we're really doing. And I have the EQ turned off. For Danny, when we were doing the ear training, this is what we had here. So for mine, this mic doesn't seem to need a lot of EQ. The particular mic I'm using here is the Earthworks Ethos. It, along with my voice, seem to fit pretty well together, and I don't feel like I need a lot of EQ. On other mics that have a little bit more mid-range sensitivity, sometimes I need to do a little bit of a cut, and oftentimes I would come to somewhere like maybe around here and cut 3 or 4 dB maybe, depending on how much I need. I might also get the other point here, trying to see if this is, this is a point. And I would bring this down to around here, maybe widen it up some. That's on microphones that tend to be a little bit more mid-forward or have a little bit more resonance with my voice. I will often do things like that. But right now, completely off. The only thing we're doing is a high-pass filter at around 70 Hertz. So that's all. Keeping it simple. Matt says, I got my new YOLO Box Ultra, except for the audio that led to my rant. I'm super impressed. A guy explains how to use the Streamer X as an audio source. I'm going to try that later today. That's cool. Yeah, because I know that in the previous version of the YOLO Box, they had an integration with the Rodecaster Pro. So the Streamer X it sounds like can fit in for that as well. So essentially you have your live stream encoder with a screen, YOLO Box, and then you have your audio mixer. And I think you connect them via USB. And that should solve what you're trying to achieve here. Solve the rant. So good luck. I hope that works well, Matt. I hope the YOLO Box Ultra works well too. I haven't tried that yet. So if you were to want a software-based audio spectrum analyzer, what would one look for? I generally just use the ones built in. So we showed you just a moment ago the one that was built into Adobe Audition. I believe let's see what they have in Resolve here. Give me just a moment here to get Resolve running. I'm not, what's that? Oh, it's almost time. It's not necessarily, I would just start with the built-in. It's usually an RTA, real-time analyzer, or frequency analysis in Adobe Audition. I just start with the built-in one. A lot of them are pretty rich as they are. Not necessarily a need to go outside of that anymore. Okay. Sheriff Logs. Do you use a Synology NAS? I do not. No, we keep everything on the work drives and then we back up to traditional spinning disk. So Emma is generally just editing from a work drive. We're not working bigger. At work, we are actually switching off of a NAS. We had a Synology at one point. We switched to another one that was all SSD, and now we're actually going to Frame.io. So we're going to use Frame.io as our NAS because we are a distributed team, not all in the same office. So that's the answer there. And those fast SSD drives function as a nice hand warmer in cold computer rooms. True, absolutely. Caution about USB-C, USB 3.x. Cables matter. A cable with missing wire pairs does not support high speeds, extra RX-TX pairs. Okay, good to know. Thank you for that, Robert. Steve, yes, I was thinking DaVinci Resolve. Audio still main focus, but would like to edit the video as well. Yeah, I think that'll be a good place to start, Steve.
Okay, here's the last one.
Danny says this is the last one. Congrats to Earthworks that won the best live vocal microphone at the NAMM show this year. Very good. Yes, congrats to Earthworks on that. I've been quite happy with the Earthworks microphones that I've had. And I've got 3 of them. I've got the Ethos here. We have the SV33, which is actually no longer in production. That was their sort of studio vocal microphone from before. And I have the SR314, which is basically a live vocal condenser mic as well. So, but more expensive than the one that just won the award. They just won the award for the SR117, I believe. All right, friends, it is time to call it for today. For those that are into the Super Bowl, I hope your team wins. I don't know how it's not going to work for everybody, but San Francisco's got a lot of people driving around with flags. I was just there this last week. They're very excited there in San Francisco. In any case, get out there, make some great sound. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye.